Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode on our channel. I'm really excited to have you here today. This is English Elevate Express, and I'm your host, Anna. Today, I want to talk to you about something that I believe with all my heart. And I know it might sound surprising at first, but just hear me out. Today's topic is talking in English is so easy. Yes, you heard me right. Talking in English is easy, and I'm going to tell you exactly why I say that, even though so many people struggle with it. This is not just some motivational statement. It's real, it's practical, and it's possible for you. And don't worry, I'll share my story, tips, mindset shifts, and daily practices that helped me feel confident speaking English, naturally, without fear. So grab a cup of tea or coffee, relax, and let's have this heart-to-heart conversation like two friends chatting. Ready? Let's dive in. There was a time when I used to think speaking English was the hardest thing in the world. I knew words. I understood what people were saying. But when it came to speaking, oh my God, I froze. Every time someone asked me something in English, my brain would go blank. I'd feel nervous, embarrassed, and scared of making a mistake. Maybe you feel that too sometimes? Like you know English, but still, something holds you back when you try to speak. So first, let me say this clearly. You are not alone. So many learners go through the exact same thing. And that's the reason I wanted to create this podcast, to share the truth, to help you break the fear, and to show you that yes, talking in English can be easy. Let's first understand why it feels hard. Because when you know the why, it becomes easier to change. For me, the biggest problem was overthinking. I thought too much before I spoke. I was scared of grammar, scared of pronunciation, scared of making a fool of myself. I would ask myself things like, is this the right word? Will they laugh at my accent? What if I say something wrong? Sound familiar? This kind of thinking creates a wall between your brain and your mouth. You might know English, but your brain is stuck in analysis mode. So here's the first mindset shift I want you to make. Speaking is not about perfection, it's about connection. When babies learn to talk, do they think about grammar? No, they just copy what they hear. They speak with confidence even if they make mistakes. And guess what? That's how they get better, by speaking, not by being perfect. So take the pressure off. You don't need to speak like a native speaker, you just need to express your thoughts. That's it. Now, let me share a little story about how I changed my mindset. One day, I was at a coffee shop and I heard a tourist asking for directions. He spoke broken English very slowly, with mistakes, but he had a big smile on his face. And the people helping him also smiled and responded kindly. Nobody laughed. Nobody judged him. And I thought, wow, he's so confident, even though his English is not perfect. That was my moment. I decided, if he can speak with mistakes, I can too. From that day, I started practicing English like it was a fun game, not a school exam. I stopped judging myself and started enjoying the process. And do you know what happened? I improved. Fast. Now here's the secret I discovered. The more you speak, the easier it gets. Think about driving a car. Was it easy the first time? No. You had to remember the brake, accelerator, mirror, signals, so many things. But now you can drive without even thinking. Speaking English is the same. At first it's slow, but with daily practice, it becomes natural. So how do you start? Let me give you some practical steps I used, which you can use too. Step 1. Speak alone every day. Yes, talk to yourself. You don't need a partner in the beginning. Just speak out loud when you're alone. Describe what you're doing. For example, I'm making tea. Now I'm sitting at the table. I'm going to check my phone. It sounds simple, but it's powerful. You're training your brain to think and speak in English naturally. I used to walk around my room like a little radio, just narrating my day. And it worked like magic. Step 2. Shadowing practice. This one is fun. Choose a short English video with subtitles, maybe from YouTube like a vlog or a TED Talk. Then play a sentence, pause, and repeat it exactly like the speaker. Match their speed, tone, and rhythm. It helps with pronunciation, fluency, and confidence. I used to do this with English interviews. I'd pause, repeat, rewind, and copy the speaker's energy. It felt like I was acting, and guess what? It made speaking feel natural. Step 3. Use simple words. Many learners think they need big words to speak well. Not true. Native speakers use simple words all the time. You don't need to say, I am feeling overwhelmed due to my obligations, when you can just say, I'm stressed because I have too much work. Focus on expressing, not impressing. Step 4, record yourself. This one changed everything for me. I started recording myself talking about daily topics. At first, it was awkward, but over time, I began to notice improvement. I'd say, wow, I'm better than last week. It's also a great way to track your progress. You can talk about anything, your weekend, your dreams, your problems, your favorite movie. Just hit record and speak for 5 minutes. Then listen and notice your flow. Step 5. Join speaking communities. There are so many online groups where people meet to practice English. You can join speaking rooms, video calls, or even WhatsApp audio chats. The first time I joined one, I was super nervous. But after 2 to 3 sessions, I felt so free. People were kind, supportive, and struggling just like me. It's easier when you practice with others. You realize you're not alone. Now, let's talk about the biggest myth. My grammar is not good, so I can't speak. Listen, grammar is important, but not the most important. You can learn grammar while speaking. You don't need to wait. When you speak with mistakes, people still understand. And over time, your grammar improves naturally through listening and speaking. I always say this, grammar is like seasoning. Speaking is the dish. Don't wait for perfect salt before you cook. Just start cooking. Now, here's a little mindset hack I use daily. Before I speak, I say to myself, it's okay to make mistakes. I am learning. I am growing. I am proud of myself for trying. This tiny affirmation gives me so much power. Because confidence is not something you get after you become fluent. It's something you build as you speak. Let me tell you a personal success story. A few months ago, I had to give a presentation in English at my job. I was nervous, but I reminded myself, talking in English is easy. I'm just sharing my ideas. I didn't try to sound smart. I just spoke from the heart. And you know what? Everyone loved it. My manager said, you explained it so clearly. That's when I truly believed. Yes, it is easy. And hey, before I let you go today, I just want to spend a little more time with you because there's so much more I want to share about why talking in English is so easy once you allow yourself to embrace it fully. Let's continue our conversation, more like a long, relaxed chat over coffee, where we dive deeper into every little idea, every little step you can take to overcome the hesitation and truly enjoy speaking English. You see, one of the most important things I learned on this journey was that the beauty of language is in its flexibility. English, like any language, is full of surprises. It's constantly evolving, and that evolution is one of its most delightful features. You're not constrained by strict rules in every moment, and that means you have creative freedom. I remember sitting in a park on a sunny day, speaking to a friend about my favorite book, and we both ended up creating our own inside jokes that only made sense to us. There was no formal grammar lesson in that moment, just pure, spontaneous connection. That's the essence of why talking in English can feel so natural and effortless. One key idea I often share is that language is meant to serve you, not trap you. When you think about it, language is a tool for expression. The most important part isn't the perfect sentence structure or that every word is pronounced with absolute precision. It's about conveying your thoughts, your emotions, and your experiences. Have you ever noticed how your most memorable conversations are the ones where you felt completely understood, even if the words weren't perfect? That's because communication is so much more than just the words we use. It's our intentions, our tone, and our willingness to connect. Let's take another example from real life. I used to be terrified of speaking in a group setting because I was so worried about making mistakes. But then I started attending local language meetups. At my very first meeting, I was shaking and my heart was pounding. I felt like I was about to stutter into oblivion. But then I realized something transformative. Every single person in that room was in the same boat. There were beginners, intermediates, and even people who were completely bilingual but still got nervous sometimes. One person's mistake sparked laughter, but not the cruel kind of laughter, more like a warm, comforting giggle that said, Don't worry, we're all human here. That moment really opened my eyes. Mistakes aren't failures, they're stepping stones. So here's another tip. Embrace your mistakes as proof that you're trying and that you're growing. Each error is like a small flag that marks your progress. You learn something new every time you slip up, and that's how you get better. I often like to remind myself with a simple phrase, each mistake is a chance to improve. It sounds a bit cliche, but trust me, it works wonders. Another aspect of speaking English effortlessly is building a mental library of phrases, chunks of language that you can use in various situations. For instance, instead of mentally constructing a sentence from scratch every time, why not have a few go-to expressions ready? I have a list in my head for everyday conversations, like, I'm really excited about that, or that sounds interesting. Tell me more. When these phrases become second nature, you can insert them into your conversations without the pressure of inventing something on the spot. It's similar to how musicians have scales. Having your language scales on hand can help you improvise beautifully in real-time conversation. And let's talk about the fun part, the constant playfulness of language. English is rich with idioms, slang, and playful expressions that add color to communication. Once I started exploring these, I found that I was no longer intimidated by the fear of saying something wrong. Instead, I began to enjoy experimenting with language. I would mix in a quirky idiom here or a funny slang phrase there, which made the conversation lively and, importantly, personal. The idea is to let your personality shine through your words. After all, language is a reflection of who you are, and every accent, every quirky phrase, and every little mispronunciation adds to your unique charm. When I speak, I often remind myself that authenticity matters far more than perfection. I once listened to a podcast episode featuring a very charismatic speaker who repeatedly stuttered when they got excited. Yet their energy was so infectious that I found myself nodding along every word. That episode taught me a valuable lesson. It's not about being a polished speaker. It's about being genuine. So if you sometimes trip over your words, know that it's not a sign of failure. It's simply a part of being human. There are many practical ways you can cultivate this ease in speaking English. For example, try to surround yourself with the language. Even if you're not in an English-speaking country, you can set your phone, computer, or even your TV to English. Listen to English music, watch your favorite TV shows in English, and read English books or articles. Immersion plays a crucial role in internalizing the language in a natural manner. When you're constantly exposed to English, your brain starts to think in that language, and soon forming sentences becomes as automatic as breathing. I remember an afternoon when I was feeling a bit down about my progress. Instead of feeling frustrated, I decided to do something different. I listened to a playlist of my favorite upbeat English songs. There's something magical about music. It bypasses all the internal filters and taps right into your emotions. Even if you don't understand every single word at first, the rhythm, tone, and melody often convey the meaning. Before I knew it, I was singing along, feeling confident and joyful, realizing that language could be experienced as art rather than just a subject to study. Now, let's delve a bit deeper into some exercises that really helped me transform my English speaking skills. Imagine this. Every morning, as soon as you wake up, spend 5 to 10 minutes speaking out loud. Not to anyone in particular, just you. Describe your dreams, recount snippets of your sleep, or simply share what you're grateful for. This practice, though it might seem silly at first, gets you into the habit of thinking in English. It's like setting the tone for the day. Over time, what once felt awkward can become as natural as your morning coffee ritual. I also discovered that storytelling is a powerful tool. Stories have a universal appeal. They captivate and connect people. Pick any simple story from your life. A funny incident at work, an interesting conversation with a stranger, or even a childhood memory. Narrate it to yourself in English. Over time, narrating stories not only improves your fluency, but also makes you more comfortable with the flow of language. You start noticing how different words evoke different emotions, and soon you'll be able to tell a story that's as vivid as the moment when it happened. Another fun idea is to use a mirror. Yes, literally speak to yourself in the mirror. It might feel awkward at first, but it's one of the best ways to practice maintaining eye contact and speaking confidently. You'll be surprised at how talking to your own reflection can boost your self-assurance. The mirror doesn't judge. It's a silent companion that's always there to remind you that you are on a journey. And every day, you're a little bit better. Now, let's talk about the social side of learning. While solo practices are fantastic, interacting with others can propel your progress even further. Have you ever noticed that the best learning often happens when you're engaged in conversation rather than passive listening? That's why joining language exchange programs or finding a speaking buddy can be a game changer. I remember my very first language exchange session. My conversation partner was from Australia, and we bonded over our mutual love for travel and food. The conversation flowed naturally, and any mistakes were quickly glossed over by our shared laughter. Those moments were invaluable. They taught me that conversation is a two-way street where every error is a shared learning opportunity. Sometimes we underestimate the impact of community on our confidence. When you're surrounded by fellow learners, you're reminded that everyone is trying, everyone is growing, and no one is perfect. These environments help reduce the fear of judgment and provide a supportive space where you can experiment with language without the pressure of getting it right. It's like being part of a secret club where the only rule is to enjoy the journey. I also want to touch on the idea of self-compassion. Yes, I know it sounds a bit like a trendy buzzword, but hear me out. When you're hard on yourself about every mistake, you create an internal barrier that stops you from reaching your potential. Instead, try to treat yourself like you would treat a dear friend. If a friend stumbled over their words, you wouldn't criticize them, would you? You'd encourage them to try again, to take their time, and to laugh off the error. Apply that same kindness to yourself. Encourage yourself with positive affirmations, celebrate your small victories, and don't dwell on the missteps. Remember, progress is not a straight line. It's a winding path, and every step counts. I want to share another story, a moment when I realized that even silence can be powerful. At one point during a group conversation, I felt completely lost for words. I wasn't sure what to say, and for a moment I hesitated. Instead of filling the silence with nervous babble, I embraced the quiet. I listened intently to what others were saying, taking in every detail. And you know what? That silence gave me the courage to observe, learn, and eventually respond with a thought that was richer and more meaningful. Sometimes the pressure to speak can be overwhelming, but it's perfectly okay to pause, reflect, and then speak with intention. After all, a well-thought-out comment, no matter how delayed, is often more impactful than a rushed remark. For those moments when your anxiety starts to creep in, a rapid heartbeat, sweaty palms, a mind that suddenly feels blank, I have a little trick that works wonders. I call it the 3-2-1 breathing method. It's super simple. Breathe in deeply for 3 seconds. Hold your breath for 2 seconds. Exhale slowly for 1 second. Repeat this a few times before jumping into conversation. It calms your mind and helps you regain your focus. I've used this technique countless times, whether before a big presentation or just starting up a conversation with a new friend. It's these small techniques that build up your overall confidence, making speaking in English feel like second nature. Now, let's talk about another interesting aspect of language learning: cultural immersion. When you learn a language, you're not just learning words and grammar, you're also stepping into a culture. I found that learning about the culture behind the language made my learning journey even more rewarding. I started watching movies, reading books, and even cooking recipes from English-speaking countries. This kind of cultural immersion not only enriches your vocabulary, but also gives you context. You start to understand jokes, idioms, and expressions on a deeper level. It transforms language learning from a mechanical exercise into an adventure where every word is imbued with meaning and history. For instance, while watching some classic English films, I noticed that the dialogue was so conversational, so real. Characters would speak in a way that wasn't always grammatically perfect, yet it felt so genuine. That taught me that language is living. It's not just set in textbooks. When you internalize that, you begin to see English as a dynamic, evolving means of expression, rather than a strict set of rules you must adhere to rigidly. Let me also share some insights on handling feedback. When you're learning to speak English, you might receive feedback from teachers, friends, or even strangers. Sometimes that feedback is constructive, and other times it might sting a bit. The key is to remember that feedback is a gift. It's not an attack on your abilities, it's an opportunity to improve. When someone points out a mistake, listen to what they say, thank them, and then decide if it's something you'd like to work on. Not every piece of feedback needs to be taken to heart, but every piece of feedback is a chance for growth. I remind myself that even the most eloquent speakers in the world were once learners too, and they relied on the small, sometimes critical, nudges to better themselves. Another practice I've grown fond of is journaling in English. Every evening, I take a few moments to jot down my thoughts in my journal. I write about the day, my feelings, and even record any new expressions or words that I encountered. Over time, this not only improves my writing skills, but also reinforces my speaking skills because language is all connected. When you write, you think carefully about how to express yourself, and those thoughts eventually find their way into your conversations. Journaling becomes a mirror for your progress, a personal log that shows you how far you've come. On days when I felt like I wasn't improving, I'd reread my journal and realize, hey, look at all the progress I've made, even if it doesn't feel like it at the moment. It's also vital to have fun with the process. I mean, who said learning English has to be all work and no play? There are games, quizzes, tongue twisters, and even online challenges that can make the process delightful. I once participated in an online tongue twister contest where I had to say, "She sells seashells by the seashore," as fast as I could without tripping up. It was hilarious, and even though I stumbled several times, I couldn't stop laughing. That kind of playful interaction with the language makes you more comfortable and less self-critical. You begin to see language learning as a joyful exploration rather than a chore. One more thing that really helped me was setting small, achievable goals. Instead of focusing on being fluent in an entire language overnight, I set mini goals. I challenged myself to learn a new word every day or to initiate one new conversation per week. These little milestones add up, and each one gives you a burst of confidence. Every time you achieve a goal, no matter how small, you reinforce the idea that you are capable, you are improving, and speaking English is indeed easy. I remember the excitement I felt the first time I managed to have a 5-minute conversation without stumbling over my words. It was as if I had unlocked a new level in a game. And from that day on, I was more confident stepping out of my comfort zone. And what about listening? I can't stress enough how important it is to listen actively. Listening is the other side of speaking. It's like two sides of the same coin. When you listen to native speakers, you absorb nuances, intonations, and the rhythm of the language. I often set aside time to listen to podcasts, watch interviews, or even just listen to ambient conversations in public spaces. There's a whole symphony in the way people speak, And when you tune into that, your own ability to speak naturally improves. You start mimicking the flow, the pauses, and even the emotions behind the words. It's as though you're unconsciously absorbing the secret sauce of fluent speech. During one particularly memorable afternoon, I sat in a busy cafe, headphones on, and simply observed. I listened to the overlapping chatter of people discussing their lives, orders being taken, the clinking of cups and saucers. All the ambient sounds were part of an intricate tapestry of daily life in English. And as I soaked in this natural environment, I realized that every conversation, no matter how casual, is an opportunity to learn. Sometimes the most important lessons come not from structured classes, but from life itself. All right, let's keep going with our conversation. I'm so glad you're sticking with me because there's so much more to share on why talking in English is actually so easy when you give yourself the freedom to make mistakes and learn as you go. I want you to see how each step, no matter how small it may seem, builds upon the other. So let's dive deeper. One of the key things I realized on my journey was that mistakes are gifts. Think about it for a minute. When you make a mistake, it's not a sign of failure. It's your brain's way of learning something new. Every error is a signal that you're expanding your knowledge and getting closer to fluency. I remember a time when I mixed up two words that sounded similar, and instead of feeling embarrassed, I turned it into a fun moment. I would laugh at myself and then make a mental note of the correction. Over time, those little reminders built up into a strong foundation of vocabulary and pronunciation. I truly believe that there's no such thing as a perfect start. If we wait for the perfect moment or perfect vocabulary, we might never begin. And that's why I encourage you to speak, even if it's imperfect. Each word, each sentence, each conversation is a stepping stone. In fact, I often remind myself, every sentence is progress. It's like building a mosaic. You piece together the big picture with small, imperfect elements until you create something beautiful and expressive. Let me give you another personal story to illustrate this. Not long ago, I was chatting with a friend from another country who was also learning English. We were talking about our hobbies, our dreams, and even our weird habits. In one of our conversations, she tried to explain something using a phrase she had learned from a movie. It wasn't exactly what the native speaker might say, but I understood her perfectly, and she understood me too. That conversation didn't go perfectly by any textbook standard, but it was authentic, warm, and most importantly, it was real communication. And that's what language is all about. I started thinking of language as a tool for connection rather than a set of rigid rules. The more I practiced, the more comfortable I became with the natural flow of conversation. I began to embrace slang, expressions, and even the occasional mistake because they added character and personality to my speech. And that's another secret. Be yourself. Your unique voice is what makes your conversation engaging and relatable. Another important piece of the puzzle is what I like to call the power of repetition. When I first started, I would practice a specific phrase or sentence until it felt like it was a natural part of my thinking. I would repeat it in different scenarios, tweak it a little, and eventually it became second nature. This technique is not just for vocabulary, it works wonders for building confidence. Imagine if every time you repeated something, it anchored itself in your memory. Before you know it, what once seemed tricky becomes an automatic response. Also, consider the impact of music and media in your learning process. I know many of you love listening to music, watching movies, or even binge-watching TV series. Well, these aren't just entertaining, they're educational too. When you listen carefully to the lyrics of a song or the dialogue in a movie, you absorb intonation, rhythm, and emotion. I've spent countless evenings mimicking the dialogues of my favorite films, noticing the subtle cues in the speakers' voices. This not only enhanced my pronunciation, but also gave me a deeper understanding of the cultural context behind some expressions. Even if you don't grasp every single nuance, the exposure itself is a huge help. Let's talk about another tip that made a huge difference: creating a language environment. When I say environment, I mean actively surrounding yourself with English as much as possible. This could be in your home, work, or even during your leisure time. I used to label items around my house with their English names. My coffee mug became coffee mug. The door became door. And even the cat was affectionately labeled as cat. This constant reinforcement helped my brain associate objects with words in a natural, intuitive way. It's like feeding your brain little nuggets of learning all day long. I also joined online discussion groups where the primary language was English. At first, I just listened. Then, when I felt comfortable enough, I joined the conversation. Not only did this improve my vocabulary, but it also allowed me to see how real, unfiltered conversations work. Sometimes I even recorded those sessions, with permission, of course, to review later. It's fascinating to listen to yourself and notice improvement over time. Now, I want to share something that goes a bit deeper: the emotional side of learning a language. When you're learning to speak English, your emotions play a huge role. Fear, excitement, joy, and even frustration are all part of the journey. At times, I felt overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information I thought I needed to master. But then I learned to embrace the emotional roller coaster. I began treating every conversation as an experiment rather than a test, which removed the crippling fear of failure. It was liberating to see mistakes not as embarrassments, but as valuable feedback. In essence, emotions are your allies in language learning if you let them. When you speak from the heart, your authenticity shines through and people are naturally drawn to that sincerity. One exercise that I found incredibly effective was journaling in English. Every night, I'd write about my day, my thoughts, or even simple observations. Initially, it was challenging because I would spend a lot of time trying to perfect each sentence. But then I switched my mindset. Journaling became a tool for free expression. I stopped worrying about being grammatically perfect, and instead allowed my thoughts to flow naturally. Over time, not only did my writing improve, but my speaking did too, because I was already thinking in English. This daily ritual reaffirmed that language is a living entity. It evolves with you. Another practice I love is thinking in English. It might sound odd at first, but try it out. Instead of mentally translating from your native language to English, try to think directly in English. It may feel awkward, but with time, it makes a huge difference. I remember catching myself during the day, simply thinking in English without even realizing it. It was as if my brain had started treating English as one of its primary languages. This shift from translation to direct thinking is what really makes speaking so effortless. Of course, all this practice requires patience, and sometimes you might feel like you're not making any progress at all. Here's a secret: progress in language learning isn't always linear. Some days you may feel brilliant and fluent, while other days you might struggle to find the right words. And that's perfectly okay. What matters is that you keep pushing forward, even on the days when it feels like you're walking through mud. Every single effort you put in is paving the way for greater fluency and ease in speaking English. I also want to discuss another tool that really helped me, a method I like to call micro conversations. These are brief, spontaneous interactions in English that don't require the pressure of planning or formal structure. For instance, when you're at a supermarket or ordering food at a restaurant, use these moments as opportunities to practice. Greet the cashier, ask a simple question about a product, or compliment someone's choice in a friendly manner. These little exchanges are not only opportunities to practice, but also serve as reminders that speaking English doesn't always need to be a grand performance. It can be as simple as a smile and a thank you. There was this one time I used a micro conversation approach in a coffee shop. I walked in, and instead of ordering in my head and then having a pre-written script in my mind, I just said, "Hi, can I have a medium latte, please?" The barista smiled, replied warmly, and I felt a rush of relief and joy. It might seem trivial, but that small act reminded me that English is about connection. It's a language that exists to facilitate human interaction. Every hi and thank you is a step toward greater confidence. I want to talk a little about accent and pronunciation, two aspects that often intimidate learners. First, let me assure you, having an accent is not a flaw. In fact, it's a beautiful reminder of your unique background. What matters most is clarity, not mimicking a so-called perfect accent. I used to obsess over how I pronounce certain words, comparing myself to native speakers on TV. Then I realized that listeners care more about your message and passion than your accent. Naturally, through shadowing practice and constant exposure, my pronunciation improved. But it was only after I stopped stressing about it that I truly began to enjoy speaking. A fun exercise I recommend is reading tongue twisters in English. Not only do these help loosen up your mouth muscles, but they also improve your pronunciation in a playful way. Start slowly, then gradually increase your speed. Before you know it, your mouth will be more agile, and those tricky sounds that once held you back will start to roll off your tongue effortlessly. It's all about playful practice. Remember, the goal is to have fun and find your rhythm. Let's also take a moment to discuss the importance of listening. Great communication isn't just about talking, it's equally about listening. When you truly listen to native speakers, you start to internalize patterns of intonation, emotion, and word choice that can enrich your own speech. I remember listening to a podcast one day and picking up on the subtle shifts in tone that conveyed humor, sarcasm, or empathy. These nuances are what make language so vibrant. So make time to listen, whether it's a podcast, radio show, or just everyday conversations. The more you listen, the easier it will be to speak. Another incredibly effective exercise is role-playing. Imagine various scenarios you might encounter: ordering food, having a job interview, or meeting someone new at a party, and then play them out aloud. It might feel a bit silly at first, but it's a brilliant way to prepare for real-life situations without any pressure. I used to do this when I was anxious about an upcoming meeting. I rehearsed different ways to introduce myself, different ways to explain my ideas. This role-playing not only boosted my confidence, but also helped me discover phrases and expressions I might not have thought of in a real situation. Over time, these rehearsed phrases transformed into spontaneous parts of my vocabulary. And let's not forget about body language and facial expressions. Communication isn't just confined to words. Your tone, your gestures, and even your facial expressions play a massive role in how your message is received. When I practice speaking, I try to relax my face, smile a bit, and use my hands naturally, as if I were sharing a story with a close friend. This makes me feel more at ease and helps the listener connect with me on a personal level. In fact, I've read studies that show that our emotions are often conveyed more through nonverbal cues than through the actual words we say. So, allow your whole self to be part of the conversation. Let your excitement, your passion, and even your nervousness become part of the experience. Over time, you'll notice that the more natural you are, the easier it becomes to speak fluently. Now, I want to dive into a topic that sometimes gets overlooked: the importance of imagination and creativity in language practice. Sometimes when I sit down to practice, I create elaborate stories or dialogues in my head and then speak them out loud. It's a way of giving life to the words and experimenting with different expressions. For instance, I might imagine myself in a bustling market in London or a quiet cafe in Paris, and then describe my surroundings in detail. This not only makes the exercise more engaging, but also helps your brain associate English with vivid, memorable experiences. Think of it as storytelling. The more creative you are with your practice, the more natural your language production becomes. I also want to mention that learning to speak English doesn't only improve your language skills. It opens up a world of cultural understanding. Every time you converse in English, you get a taste of diverse perspectives, values, and traditions. I have encountered people from all walks of life who share their unique stories through this common language. That's what makes English such a powerful bridge between cultures. When you're actively participating in conversations, you begin to see the rich tapestry of experiences, struggles, and triumphs that make up our global community. And this realization can be deeply motivating. It reminds you that language is not just a skill, but a gateway to understanding, empathy, and connection. At times, you might feel that your progress is too slow. Let me assure you that language learning is a marathon, not a sprint. There are days when you will feel like you're speaking with complete ease, and days when every word feels like a struggle. It's all part of the process. I've learned to celebrate small victories, a new expression mastered, a conversation where I didn't hesitate, or even a smile from a native speaker who appreciated my effort. Recognize that every bit of progress is a win and let that fuel your confidence for the next conversation. Sometimes I wonder if I'm alone in this struggle, but then I remember all the communities I've joined, the online forums, the exchange partners, and even random people on the street who took a minute to chat with me in English. They all had one thing in common. They were once in your shoes. Everyone who speaks English fluently today once fought through hesitations and self-doubt. And that shared experience makes you part of a global family. So, whenever you feel low or frustrated, reach out to someone who understands the journey. Chances are they have tips, advice, or even just an encouraging word to share. Let me also address something I'm sure many of you have encountered: the overwhelming abundance of language resources out there. Books, apps, courses, and tutors are all available, but sometimes too many choices can lead to analysis paralysis. I recall a time when I downloaded almost every language learning app I could find, trying to master every aspect of the language at once. It ended up feeling more like a distraction than a help. Eventually, I learned that the key was to pick a few tools that resonated with me and stick with them consistently. For example, I chose to combine daily speaking practice with listening to a particular podcast and reading a few articles every week. Consistency beats variety when it comes to building a habit, and that habit of engaging with English regularly is what truly makes it easy over time. Now, I'd like to touch on one more practice that transformed my speaking skills: self-reflection and feedback. After each conversation, or even after speaking to yourself in the mirror, take a moment to reflect. What went well? What could be improved? And then set a small goal for your next practice session. It could be as simple as trying a new expression or working on a particular pronunciation. By continuously analyzing your own speech, you create a feedback loop that helps you fine-tune your skills. It might feel a bit like being your own coach, but trust me, it is one of the most effective ways to grow. And speaking of feedback, don't be afraid to ask for it from others. Whether it's a teacher, a friend, or someone in your speaking community, constructive criticism is golden. Most people appreciate genuine efforts to improve, and many will gladly share tips from their own journeys. It takes a bit of vulnerability, but remember, vulnerability is where real growth happens. When you let your guard down and ask for help, you not only learn faster, but you also build deeper connections with those around you. Before we wrap up, let me ask you a question. What is your why? Ask yourself, why do you want to speak English? Is it to travel, to advance your career, to connect with people, or perhaps simply to enjoy literature and films in their original language? Understanding your motivation can be a powerful driver. For me, it was always about connection and self-expression. Every time I learned a new phrase or engaged in a conversation, I felt a little more connected to the world. And that sense of connection is what makes language learning so rewarding. If you ever feel discouraged, remind yourself of your why. Picture the places you'll go, the people you'll meet, and the ideas you'll share. Hold on to that vision when doubts creep in. One day, you'll look back and realize that what once seemed impossible has now become an effortless part of your life. I'd like you to consider one more powerful idea: empathy in communication. When you engage in conversation, especially in a language that's not native to you, you learn empathy in a unique way. You become aware of cultural nuances, the pain of being misunderstood, and the joy of being understood. You become an ambassador of your own culture and at the same time, a student of another's. This dual perspective enriches every conversation, turning it into a mutual learning experience. In a sense, speaking English becomes less about just transferring information and more about exchanging experiences. And it's that exchange that makes every conversation memorable. I hope you feel inspired by all these insights and remember that every time you speak, you're growing. Even if you stumble over your words or forget what you wanted to say, each moment is an opportunity to learn and laugh. Embrace the journey, savor the little victories, and know that every conversation is a milestone on your path to fluency. As we come to the close of our extended conversation today, I want you to take one final message to heart. Confidence is built through action. There will be days of hesitation and days of triumph. Embrace both. With every sentence you construct, with every conversation you initiate, you prove to yourself that speaking English is not only easy, it's exciting, it's dynamic, and it's a doorway to a richer life. There is a whole world out there waiting for your stories, your ideas, and your unique perspective. By sharing your voice in English, you contribute to a global conversation that transcends borders and bridges cultures. Before I say goodbye, let me share a quiet affirmation for all of us learning this beautiful language. Every word I speak is a step toward a brighter connection. I am confident. I am capable. I am growing with every conversation. So, take a deep breath, smile, and step into your next conversation with the belief that English is, and always will be, a tool for joyful expression. Remember, it's all about the journey, the interactions, and the laughter shared along the way. Thank you for being here with me today, for investing your time and energy in learning and growing. I hope that the tips, stories, and practices we explored together inspire you to speak English with newfound confidence and ease. Whether you're practicing in the mirror, talking to a friend, or engaging with a new acquaintance, know that every moment is progress. And if you ever doubt yourself, remember that the very act of trying makes you a champion. Every conversation is a victory, and every practice session is a celebration of your commitment to learning. I encourage you to smile at your mistakes, laugh them off, and keep moving forward. After all, the only real mistake is the one where you never try. As you continue on this journey, may you find endless inspiration in every conversation. And may you always remind yourself that talking in English is so easy when you allow it to be a natural extension of who you are. Keep experimenting, keep embracing the fun in every word, and most importantly, keep speaking from your heart. I'm Anna, and thank you for spending this time with me, truly connecting through language and shared experiences. Until next time, keep speaking, keep dreaming, and keep proving to yourself every day that English, just like life, is meant to be enjoyed, flaws and all. Take care, my friend, and remember, every time you speak, you light up the world just a little bit more. Goodbye for now, and I'll be here with you on your next step of this wonderful adventure. Thank you so much for continuing this journey with me, I hope this deeper dive not only reinforces the idea that talking in English is easy, but also motivates you to embrace every conversation. Don't forget to share your progress in the comments. And let's continue to support and inspire each other in this amazing language learning adventure.